Hey guys. So I got some water in my shirt. It's fine. So I wanted to do a video. I haven't done a video in a while. And I've sort of been the title of this video sort of like in defense of capitalism, right? I'm not a scholar on this topic by any means. Not really done any research, but just thinking about and observing the society around me, I've sort of come to the conclusion that this system of capitalism, in the sense that very few restrictions on business operation and price discovery in markets, is superior for humanity than is a more restrictive policy. And so if we just view these things on a spectrum of like hypercapitalism and then to like communism, I think leaning more towards the side of capitalism is more beneficial for society. Now, why do I say this? I say this because I've seen a number of different countries, Latin America, United States. I know some people from Europe. I haven't personally been there myself. And let me back up. I used to play a lot of poker, and I don't know how many people have played poker that much, but there's this concept in poker of like how much you can bet, right? So you get your poker hand and you have your chips, and you can bet, in limit poker you can bet some of your chips, up to like, let's say $10 on the hand, but you can't bet beyond that. And there's another form of poker called no limit poker, where you can bet all of the money that you have. And I view the current version of capitalism in the world as sort of a no limit hold'em version of poker. People are, you're able to risk it all, and that's what gives you the ability to make tremendous amounts. But you can also lose it all too. And I actually think that that's the best way to run a society. Now, a lot of people will say that's irresponsible because the people who do not have as much experience will bet it all and lose it. And that is certainly the case, right? However, I think that it's very difficult to say like our generation or this generation. But I do believe that there's been a shift in my generation or the previous generation where people stopped caring about family legacy. And I think that is a very important concept for a community and a society to have. Like a family name meant something, right? And I think it should mean something. Now, how the hell does all this relate to the poker? The version of capitalism that we have in the world makes it so that if there's a long line, let's say of 2 generations, so a parent and their child's life. With our version of capitalism, I think that it makes it so that even if the parent screws their life up and makes very poor decisions, the child has the ability to see the world around them, take smart action, be wise, disregard the advice of their neighbors and their friends and their family if it's bad, and then change their family's legacy. So you could have a divorced, impoverished parent, but then the child works their butt off and becomes a surgeon, and he's now changed the future of multiple generations. His kids are free to screw it up if he doesn't parent them well, right? But all it takes is that one to make the decision to do things right. Now you may say, okay, but there's people who are deeply impoverished that don't have the ability to change that in one generation. That's why the legacy thing is important. I think people these days, they live for themselves. And I think that selfishness is one of the problems with, not with capitalism, but it's what makes capitalism break. And if you don't have that selfishness, then the system works. So if you have, let's say, again, 100 years, and the grandparent has an impoverished life, and then the grandchild has an impoverished life, right? You can still have class mobility. It just takes a larger period of time and community. So if you have a good community or a family that, saves up some money, and then they die and the kids inherit that money, but then the parents teach those children, don't go spend all this money, save it and pass it on to the next generation, then you can still have that inflection point where you've built up enough capital to have social mobility, to move up to the next rank. And that can happen over the course of multiple generations. So you can have a long string of poverty, but then something clicks and someone in that community or someone in that family makes a decision to open a business, work really hard, get some extra skills, and make it in the world, right? Okay, again, move to the poker metaphor. I think that's better than the limit poker, because if you restrict it and say you can only bet $10 per hand, then given any given time horizon, you can only win X amount of money. Because if you're at that poker table, for hundreds of years, you can only win X amount. But if it's no limit, you have the ability for exponential growth. And I think that class mobility is necessary for the functioning of a healthy human society, okay? Now, I used to be very progressive and very left, and I don't like that left and right discussion, so I'll try to avoid that commentary. But I did used to have that perspective of, if we just need to make it equal for everybody. However, what I found living in other places, like right now, I'm in beautiful Ecuador. You can see the sky in the background there. And it's summer down here. Is that in some societies, there is a cultural ethos where most people have the perspective that the government should have a safety net. They should make it so that you can only bet that $10. And I think what that does is it makes people believe that they don't have a shot. And you need that belief that you can have a shot. And there's a lot of people in the United States that say, oh, that's a lie, there is no shot. Maybe in your lifetime, but you have to sacrifice. And if you sacrifice, you can grow, you can build something up and leave it to your children, and then they can move up the ladder, okay? And that's the part that I think people are missing is, right now there's this thing of oh, it's impossible, it's impossible. Yes, in your lifetime it may be impossible to move up the ladder, but don't be so selfish. Think of your family, think of your community, right? And I think that it's two very different ways of thinking about the world. One is that everything should be equal, and the problem is that what I've seen is when everything is equal, there's a secret class that is unimaginably rich that you don't know about, or you do know about. They're your leaders, you know. They have a ton of corruption. They steal all the money, and then everybody else is equal, but they are still that upper class. And so all you've done is you went from like this like band where, you know, you've got this many people in the middle, this many people in the lower, and this many people in the high, and now you've just squished this and made it this big, and then this part became really small. And I don't think that that's healthy, because then people never have aspirations to go beyond, right? And, you know, I'm sure in the literature there's probably talk of the morality and the philosophy behind all of this. But just as a layman, average guy thinking about this stuff, and considering it, I used to be very much against the idea of winner takes all. But now I'm in favor of it. And I know this video is getting long. What are we at? 11 minutes here. Another thing that I've seen that kind of has to be solved, and I don't know how you solve it, is that when you win the game of capitalism, you need ethics. Maybe not religion, but you need good people to have that capital. And what do I mean? The problem with capitalism is that it rewards playing dirty, right? We all know that lying, cheating, whatever, can get you to the top, and then you can stay there. The problem is once you win capitalism and you get $1 billion and your family is set for generations, if you don't help those that have a shot to go from the middle to the top, or from the lower to the middle, then I think you're being unethical. And I think that society should make that taboo. And I don't know if you got to do it through religion or science or whatever, but something has to be done to where it is frowned upon to get into that position of wealth and power and to use it unwisely. And we should not reward those people. In fact, they should be reprimanded, right? Instead of idolized. I think like people like Bezos or whatever, if you get to that level and you're not doing something like drastically very beneficial to society, then you should be not punished, but socially ostracized, right? Because the system only works if the people at the bottom see the people at the top doing good things, right? And I think that's where it falls apart. So good people plus capitalism, good society. And I think the problem that we have is that we have psychopaths and bad people and capitalism. And then you get a society where they're saying this system doesn't work, right? Or I don't think that this system is good for the world. And a lot of people right now are checking out, you know, they're not having kids, they're not putting work, they're not, you know, doing hard work at their jobs because they think, what's the point? And I think the answer to that is see that the sacrifice is worthwhile, knowing that your future inheritors of your legacy will eventually prosper from this system. And then secondly, see that the people on the top are doing good things and actually helping society. And if you can achieve that, then I think capitalism is close to a perfect system. You will always end up with, unfortunately, destitution, poverty, hunger, all these terrible things. However, I think that's better than a system that purposely inhibits growth. I'm just thinking if I'm missing something. Yeah, I think that you know, there will be the bad with the good. And in an idealist version of capitalism, the people from the middle help the lower to rise up, and the people from the higher help the middle to rise up. The problem is the selfishness and the belief that I can't achieve wealth within my lifetime, so I'm not going to try. Well, it's not about you. And stop thinking it's about you. And I think that there's something about our generation specifically where we just said, like, my life is for pleasure of my own time. And I think we have to go back to a time where the legacy of what you do and how hard you work for your family is respected. And it's not the government's job to lift you up. It's your job to observe the system and use that system to make yourself that much closer. And then once you get there, give back. Anyway, I don't know. Maybe I'm totally off on this, and communism can work as well, and maybe I can investigate that. But anyway, that's just what I've been thinking about lately.